about Iraq or the American mythology about the missile defense shield. It's important to us to be friendly to the Americans, and so we tend to believe their mythology for reasons which have nothing to do with the truth value of the mythology.
Some officials of the Attorney General of Canada, who is presently a fundamentalist right-wing Christian from Manitoba who has no connection with British Columbia and its values and culture, his officials are the ones behind this attempt to exercise the law of a foreign country within British Columbia's jurisdiction. The historical comparison with that is what happened to the French when the Nazis occupied France in the Second World War. Some French traders allowed themselves to go along with Nazi occupation and served in a proxy government called the Vichy government of France. They carried out German orders throughout the war as if they were a legitimate government of France. So we have that situation in Canada, where we have some officials of the Attorney General of Canada, perhaps the Attorney General of Canada himself, who are behaving in a Vichy fashion in the Emery extradition case.
If the U.S. can maintain a sort of a solid appearance of believing in the drug mythology, including the marijuana mythology, then the U.S. can, in all good faith, spend billions to support the anti-guerrilla movement in Colombia. It can invade countries and take out their leaders on the grounds that their leaders are drug kingpins, and all this has happened. It gives the U.S. a sort of a wild card in terms of foreign policy, that they can seriously claim to believe that these drugs are causing major harm to the American population.
Dr. Young, how would you characterize the Bush administration?
Yeah, well, many pathological features of hysteria and inferiority complexes characterize Bush and his administration, such as this lack of insight into their own characters, the self-aggrandizement in the megalomania, the terrorization of their fellow man, character assassinations, the career destruction of those that are bold enough to tell the truth about them publicly. And of course, this is projection of their shadows, lying distortion of reality, and an apparent need to impress with bombastic show. All of these are united in one man and his administration, which has led their people into a huge and controversial, very costly war. Now, anyone who may feel offended by the word pathological is welcome to suggest an accurate substitute that reflects the state of mind that gave birth to the plan for a new American century and the so-called New World Order. But now I must say it is very important to have compassion for the sick person. The truth should not be held back from them, for when the doctor makes a diagnosis, they do so as part of their effort to find a remedy, and not in order to hurt or degrade or insult the sufferer. A neurosis or a neurotic disposition is not a fatal disease. However, it does grow worse to the degree that one is determined to ignore it. Now, when I say the Americans are psychologically ill, it is surely kinder than saying they are criminals.
What can we make of what the American military is doing in the world today?
It shows us a picture of the common human shadow. The evil that comes to light in man that undoubtedly dwells within him is of gigantic proportions. Now, so for the church to talk about original sin and to trace it back to Adam's relative innocent slip-up with Eve is a naive and childish exaggeration. The case of the human shadow is far graver and is grossly underestimated. It is now incumbent upon us, each one of us, to become aware of our personal shadow and to take responsibility for transforming it.
We can see instances of civilizations going mad in past history. And of course, the obvious example is Germany. It went mad. Well, it didn't stay mad. I mean, it's fine now. So madness occurs in countries from time to time, and it's not a permanent thing. Countries get over it. I think we're mad now. I think Canada and the United States are on a course of madness.
We have a lot of civil liberties being intruded on, like in the United States. So we're adopting the negative things. Right now we're at a crossroads. We can go like the Americans, we can be influenced by them, or we can wait it out. They're going to take on a new point of view. I think we're going to see a real renewal, a renaissance in the United States after their crisis of confidence that they're going through now, where every institution they thought was there to help them and save them and protect them is a failure. The Army is a failure in Iraq. The Defense Department is a failure. The war on drugs is a failure. The ability to protect themselves from hurricanes and naturals is a failure. The war on poverty is a failure. Their schools are in decline. Everything about America is going wrong, and I think Americans are going to come to this understanding in the next few years and make great changes.
When they locked up every last rapist or murderer, maybe they should put a little bit of time on marijuana, but right now I think they should use their emphasis on other areas. But it's a reality of life that people are going to experiment with things that alter their mind. You know, it's just going to happen. So if you take that reality, then I just agree with the Canadian Senate. I mean, these are the oldest politicians in Canada, this group of politicians in the Senate, very experienced, and they see the war on marijuana crimes as futile, and they want not just decriminalization, they want legalization. And they put a lot more thought into it than anybody I've seen, and I've looked at the report, and I think that's the way to go.
We now have an opportunity to demonstrate that we are still strong enough as a nation, still proud enough of our sovereignty, that we can make our own social policy and repudiate the United States social policy and do as we've always done in Canada and lead them to a better way. We set a good example for the United States. Canada has always been there to help them. We gave lots of money after 9/11. Ken Taylor helped them escape the hostage crisis in Iran in 1980. You know, we've given them a lot of money after Hurricane Katrina, and we even give them all their best comedians.
And it feels to me like it's coming around to that again. I mean, we have a right-wing Republican president in there who has totally aligned himself with big business and obviously has not got the interests of the American people at heart. So this polarization that we saw during the Vietnam War seems to be happening again. We've got another very unpopular war. We've got American soldiers in foreign lands getting killed. That polarizes the nation because the families of those kids suddenly begin to think, well, wait a minute, you know, is this war really necessary? Is it worth it? So that polarization, I think in a way is good because then it's a catalyst for change.
If you look throughout, at least in my experience, often politicians play on fears of people in order to be able to spend their money. They scare people and then are able to spend the money on various projects. And you know, nothing is more obvious than since September 11th, when, you know, they've been able to, as a result of that, justify all kinds of further restrictions on civil liberties and fund different things. Well, the same is true in terms of the drug war.
I would characterize the war on terror as a continuation of the same set of principles which produced the Indian Wars and the Spanish-American Wars and the series of wars against Guatemala and Nicaragua and so forth throughout the 20th century. Then later, they become wars against abstractions like drugs. I see the American people collectively as kind of victims of a corporate culture which controls the government and which has kind of successively deceived them about why all these wars have to be. And the war on drugs is one of the big ones.
It's crazy, madness, but I've been trying to tell people this for 30 years, and it's getting worse, it's not getting better.
I think Canada and the United States are on a course of madness, and I think the war on drugs is an episode of madness, but I think the war on terror is really an escalation of that madness.
In 2006, Bush authorized the Military Commissions Act. With a single pen stroke, he wiped out the law of habeas corpus, the all-inclusive safeguard against illegal imprisonment, which is endured as part of the Magna Carta established in the 13th century. With this act now in place, you or someone you know from any country could be arrested, held indefinitely, and tortured, based solely on Bush's discretion. And no one would ever know. I looked to the Prince of Truth, Mahatma Gandhi, for an appropriate response to this tyrannical decree. Gandhiji, how can we, the citizens of the world, persuade the lion to lie down with the lamb?
If a government commits a grave injustice, the citizen must withdraw cooperation, wholly or partially, sufficiently to wean the leaders from wickedness. Even the most despotic government cannot stand without the consent of the governed. And this is most often procured by inducing fear into the citizen. But when the citizen comes to his senses and ceases to fear the despot's power, his force is immediately gone. For all truth, it must go beyond the geopolitical arena of America. Actions must be accommodated by all who profess to be true Christians. Europe, for example, in the spirit of non-cooperation, could boycott the multinational and American corporations that support the American administration. Deprive them of their profits and you relieve them of their power. And once their monopolies have vanished, then democracy can once again exercise its diversity and justice. The more a man or a nation takes to violence, the more it recedes from truth. For in fighting the imagined enemy out there, he neglected the enemy within. In spite of your belief in the greatness of your civilization, and despite of your pride in your achievements, I plead with you for some humility and ask that you leave a little room for doubt. Live and let live is what I ask of you. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Always.
I have many people to thank who kindly assisted me on this journey. Each one provided a light, a certain hope, and a measure of common sense. We identified the madness of the American myth about cannabis, and now our world is tumbling into yet a far greater madness, America's war on terror. We must all respond to the clarion call for justice, for freedom, and above all, truth. I believe the naked queen is wandering alone once again along the mountain meadow. So I will go to her mountain and seek her guidance. This journey must continue.